Even the calmest waters can conceal deadly surprises. In an instant, a peaceful swim or a routine dive can spiral into a fight for survival. From deep-sea explorations to lazy afternoons on the shore, sharks strike without warning. In this video, we'll relive 6 real-life encounters where beauty turned to blood, and every second meant the difference between life and death. On July 31, 2025, the coast of Central California shimmered beneath a soft morning sun. Families filled the wide beach with towels, umbrellas, and picnic baskets. One of them was Jessica Morgan, a 34-year-old woman who had driven from a nearby inland town to enjoy the cool sea breeze. Jessica worked at a small bakery and often spent her weekends near the ocean to relax. She loved food, peace, and the feeling of water on her skin. Weighing around 400 pounds, she often avoided swimming, but enjoyed the edge of the waves where she could stay cool without going far. That day, she had brought a faded old air mattress, the kind used for pools, planning to rest on it in the shallow surf. She set it up close to shore where small waves rolled gently. Sitting atop the float, Jessica unpacked her lunch, a sandwich, fruit, and a drink, placing them on a plastic tray. The water came up to her knees as she sat. Kids played nearby and the sound of seagulls filled the air. As Jessica ate, crumbs fell from her sandwich and floated on the surface. She brushed them away without much thought. Beneath her, the ocean remained still. But far below, a much larger creature was moving. A great white shark, powerful and silent, swam in from deeper waters. The motion near the surface, along with floating food and steady splashes, had caught its attention. Its strong body moved with control, and it slowly followed the sounds and scents that spread through the sea. The water seemed calm to those above, but below, tension was building. Jessica leaned forward on the mattress, unaware of what was approaching. She reached for her drink when, without warning, a huge force slammed from below. The shark exploded out of the water, aiming directly at the largest shape it could find. Its jaws opened wide and latched onto Jessica's upper leg with terrible power. The bite was deep, cutting through layers of flesh and muscle in a single, swift motion. She was pulled off the float and into the sea. The mattress flipped and flew sideways. Waves splashed high as the shark thrashed, dragging her under. Jessica tried to fight, kicking her free leg and pushing with both hands. The shark's body twisted, making the water churn with foam and blood. People on the beach saw the commotion and screamed in alarm. Someone grabbed a rescue ring while others ran to call for help. The attack lasted only seconds, but it left a mark no one would forget. Jessica surfaced, floating on her back with blood swirling around her. Her thigh was torn badly and the water was stained red. Bystanders ran into the waves, throwing out ropes and pulling her toward the sand. 2 men grabbed her arms and dragged her to safety while another held a towel against the injury. She was still breathing, but her face showed shock and pain. As sirens echoed in the distance, the beach grew quiet. What began as a calm summer day had turned into a fight for survival. The worst moments had passed, but Jessica's struggle was not yet over. The sound of sirens grew louder as the ambulance neared the crowded beach. Lifeguards stood ready, guiding emergency workers to the spot where Jessica lay. Her body was placed gently onto a stretcher. A thick cloth was tied tightly around her upper leg to slow the heavy bleeding. One paramedic checked her pulse while another lifted an oxygen mask to help her breathe. Her skin had turned pale, and her eyes stayed half open. She was rushed through the sand and loaded into the back of the vehicle. The doors shut quickly and the ambulance pulled away. Inside, paramedics worked fast. They started fluids through a small tube in her arm. Her body shook as the pain grew stronger. The road was bumpy, but the driver moved as quickly as possible. In the hospital, doctors waited at the door. She was wheeled straight into the trauma room. Her clothes were cut away and the leg wound was cleaned. The bite had caused deep gashes and damage to soft tissue. Her muscles were torn in many places and the skin was barely holding. The medical team gave more fluids and prepared her for surgery right away. The operation lasted over 2 hours. Surgeons cleaned out the cuts and stitched the largest openings. Some parts of her leg were beyond repair and had to be removed. They worked carefully to stop the bleeding and protect her from infection. The room stayed quiet except for machines tracking her heartbeat. After the final stitches were made, she was moved into a recovery bed. Nurses placed warm blankets over her and continually checked her condition. Word of the attack spread fast. News crews came to the beach. Witnesses shared videos and photos they had taken during the rescue. The shark had not been seen again, but lifeguards posted red flags and warned swimmers to stay out of the water. Local news stations ran the story for the rest of the day. Many people were shocked that such a large animal had come so close to shore. Experts said the scent of food in the water likely brought the shark in. Signs were put up warning people not to eat near the waves. Jessica woke up the next morning weak and sore. Her leg was wrapped in thick bandages. Doctors told her the injury would take many months to heal. She would need help walking and may never regain full strength. But she had survived, and that alone was something few expected. Nurses helped her sit up slowly and brought her soft food to eat. Her family arrived later and stayed by her side for the next few days. As time passed, Jessica's story was shared across the country. People sent kind notes, and some raised money online to help with medical costs. The beach added new rules to stop people from eating in the surf zone. Lifeguards increased patrols during busy times. Though Jessica's life would never be the same, her courage became a reminder that even small choices by the water can lead to something unexpected. On August 7, 2025, just after sunrise, the ocean near Coral Bay looked calm and bright. Boats floated quietly along the coast, and the sky was painted with soft shades of pink. Among the small vessels out that morning was a fishing boat owned by two men named Mason and Glenn. They were longtime friends and had grown up in the same coastal town. Fishing had been their job since they were young, and they spent many mornings out on the water before most people were even awake. That day, they had planned a simple catch near the outer reef before heading back home for lunch. Mason guided the boat slowly across the clear water while Glenn checked the fishing lines. As they passed a stretch near the reef, Mason noticed something dark just under the surface. It was not moving much but floated strangely. Thinking it might be a large sea animal, they moved closer to get a better look. As they approached, the outline became clearer. What appeared to be a sea creature turned out to be something else. The closer they got, the more their faces changed. It was neither a dolphin nor a turtle. It was part of a person. A human body floated, torn and lifeless. The top half was still together, but one arm and both legs were missing. The skin was pale, and pieces of the wetsuit still clung to the body. Around it, 3 bronze whaler sharks swam in tight circles. Their movements were fast and sharp. Every few seconds, one of them darted forward and bit into the body, tearing small chunks before pulling away. The water had turned cloudy with red swirls. Mason and Glenn froze, shocked and unable to speak. Glenn grabbed a pole and hit it against the side of the boat to make noise. The sharks moved back for a moment, but only to turn and come closer again. The two men looked at each other and knew they had to do something. Carefully, Mason threw out a line with a large hook. He lowered it slowly and tried to hook part of the wetsuit without shaking the water too much. After 2 tries, the hook caught on something, and Mason began pulling it back toward the boat. The sharks came close again, bumping the boat lightly as they passed. Glenn picked up a metal scoop and splashed water to distract them. As the body came closer, both men leaned over and slowly pulled it aboard. It was heavy and hard to lift, but they managed to get it onto the deck without tipping the boat. Once it was inside, they backed away, eyes wide and hands shaking. Neither of them spoke for a while. The body was badly damaged, and the sight was hard to believe. They turned the boat around at once and headed back toward the dock. The quiet water behind them no longer felt peaceful. What they had seen would stay with them forever. The boat moved quickly toward the marina as the 2 fishermen stood near the covered body. Their faces stayed pale, and the silence between them was heavy. Mason kept his eyes on the water, steering straight ahead, while Glenn stayed close to the lifeless form, watching it carefully in case the motion of the boat shifted it. The smell of the sea mixed with something sour in the air, and neither man looked down again. Every bump in the waves made the moment feel longer. The harbor soon appeared, and they pulled in without speaking a word. As the boat reached the dock, workers nearby noticed the strange look on their faces and moved closer. Glenn stepped off first and asked someone to call the police and medical team. When help arrived, officers and rescue workers took control of the scene. They carefully uncovered the body, working gently and slowly. One officer took photos, while another asked for names and details of what had happened. The body was then wrapped in clean sheets and placed in a special transport bag. It was lifted onto a waiting vehicle and taken to the local coroner's office for identification. That afternoon, news spread through the small town. People gathered in local stores, restaurants, and along the docks, whispering about what had been found. The area had already been on alert due to recent shark sightings, but no one had expected something this dire. A few hours later, the body was identified. It belonged to a man named Eric Dalton, a free diver who had gone missing 2 days before. He had not returned after telling friends he was heading out to explore the coral areas near the outer reef. The damage to the body was severe, and experts were called to study the marks. The deep cuts and missing limbs showed clear signs of shark bites. The shape and pattern of the wounds matched bronze whaler sharks. Scientists confirmed that the first strike had likely been deadly. They believed Eric had died quickly during the attack. What the fishermen had seen afterward was the result of more sharks feeding on what remained. The discovery shocked the town and left a lasting scar on the small fishing community. Search teams had already been out looking for Eric since his disappearance, but nothing had been found before that morning. Now, the rest of the search was called off. Officials thanked the two fishermen for recovering the remains and reminded everyone to follow the new safety steps that had been shared in the past few weeks. They also placed extra warning signs around Coral Bay and nearby beaches. Local patrol boats increased their rounds. Swimmers and divers were instructed to stay in groups and avoid going out during the early hours or near feeding times. The town organized a small memorial for Eric by the water. Family and friends came together, sharing stories and lighting candles near the edge of the bay. The quiet evening air held a mix of sadness and respect. His name was added to a plaque near the pier to honor those lost at sea. His story became a poignant reminder of how quickly the ocean can change and how danger can lurk just beneath the surface. August 8, 2024. The quiet sea around the Maldives shimmered under a clear sky as evening turned to night. The warm air mixed with salt and light wind as a small dive boat floated near an isolated reef. On board was Oliver Wade, a 39-year-old filmmaker renowned for his profound love of nature and marine life. He had spent over 10 years traveling across the world, filming underwater creatures for documentaries. Oliver had a calm voice and patient style, often waiting hours to capture the right shot. His latest project focused on glowing plankton, tiny sea life that lit up when touched. He had spent days preparing for the dive, planning to shoot scenes that would show the peaceful light under the water's surface. Along with Oliver were 3 crew members who had previously worked with him. They had tested their equipment, checked safety gear, and waited for the right time. After sunset, they lowered strong underwater lamps into the sea. The light spread out in soft circles, showing clouds of tiny glowing plankton. Each movement stirred the water, making the plankton sparkle. The team entered the sea one by one, floating slowly near the edge of the reef. Cameras rolled as the glowing shapes drifted around them. The moment felt calm and quiet. Oliver swam a few feet lower than the rest, holding his camera steady and focusing on the glowing trails. His light flashed across the reef, picking up small fish and soft coral. His arms moved gently to maintain his position. Just beyond the reach of the light, something large began to move. A heavy shape came from below, silent and fast. The creature had felt the movement and seen the bright glow. In one swift motion, a large tiger shark appeared, measuring over 13 feet in length. It came from the deep, heading straight toward the light. The animal opened its mouth wide and bit down on Oliver's leg with full force. His body jerked downward and a cloud of red filled the glowing water. The pain hit fast, and his camera slipped from his hand. He twisted and kicked, trying to break free. The shark dragged him deeper, shaking its head hard. Oliver reached for its snout, hitting it with his fists. His dive light spun in the water, flashing strange patterns through the blood and bubbles. One of his teammates saw what was happening and rushed toward him. He grabbed Oliver's BCD strap and pulled back as hard as he could. The shark finally let go and turned away, disappearing into the darkness. Oliver floated upward, limp and bleeding. His friends gathered close, guiding him toward the surface. The blood from his leg made a trail through the glowing sea. The peaceful scene had become a nightmare. The lights that once showed beauty now lit the path of danger, and above the waves, the team waited to fight for his life. The group reached the surface fast, helping Oliver stay afloat as he drifted in shock. His body felt heavy, and blood from his legs spread in the water around them. The team held him upright, careful not to let his head go under. The boat moved closer, and 2 crew members leaned over to lift him out. They placed him flat on the deck and used dry towels to apply pressure to the wound. His leg had deep cuts, and his skin was torn where the shark had clamped down. Blood soaked the towels, and the air was filled with quiet, fearful anticipation. One team member started the engine while another called for help through the radio. They gave their location and said someone had been badly hurt. The boat moved quickly toward the nearest island, bouncing slightly over small waves. Oliver lay still, barely moving. His skin had turned pale, and sweat covered his face. His breathing was fast but shallow. The pressure on his legs slowed the bleeding a little, but the wound was still open. The team stayed close, checking his pulse and trying to keep him awake. As they neared the island, lights from a small dock came into view. A medical team was already waiting. The boat slowed as helpers climbed aboard. They brought a stretcher and clean gear. Gently, they lifted Oliver and placed him on the stretcher. A blanket was wrapped around his upper body while another medic held his leg steady. The group moved quickly along a wooden path that led to a small clinic near the shore. Inside, bright lights and clean walls welcomed them. Doctors took over at once. Oliver was placed on a table while nurses cut away his wetsuit. The wound was washed with warm water, and the doctors cleaned the damaged tissue. The bite had gone deep into the muscle, but no bones were broken. Medicine was given to help with pain, and strong stitches were used to close the skin. Bandages were wrapped tightly around the leg to stop the bleeding. The doctors checked his heart and made sure he was stable. After the first treatment, he was moved to a quiet room to rest. News of the attack spread quickly. People on the island shared the story, and it reached diving groups across the region. Experts spoke about the risks of using strong lights at night near deep waters. Some said the light could confuse or attract large animals that hunt in the darkness. Safety talks were updated, and local guides reminded divers to avoid glowing lights during late hours. Oliver stayed at the clinic for several days. His leg was sore and walking would take time, but he was thankful to be alive. His team stayed nearby, helping with meals and keeping a watchful eye on him. The footage from the dive was saved, but no one wanted to watch it again for the time being. The sea that night had shown both wonder and danger. The glowing plankton, once so beautiful, had also brought something wild to the surface. Oliver would remember that moment forever. August 15, 2025. The waters off the Florida Keys were calm under a soft morning sky. Michael Reynolds, a 38-year-old U.S. Coast Guard diver, was preparing for a routine task beneath one of the patrol boats docked at a coastal outpost. He had spent more than a decade in service, known among his team for being calm under pressure and always ready to lend a hand to others. Born in Jacksonville, Florida, Michael had grown up near the sea, and diving had been part of his life since he was a teenager. He had served on multiple missions, both in rescue operations and maintenance dives, gaining deep respect for the ocean and its risks. That morning, his assignment was simple: inspect the lower hull of a patrol boat for minor damage. A storm had passed through the area earlier that week, and the command wanted to ensure that there were no cracks or broken parts below the surface. Michael checked his gear, gave a quick signal to his crew, and lowered himself into the green-blue water. His movements were slow and practiced. Sunlight reached through the surface in thin beams, but the deeper he went, the darker and hazier it became. The underside of the boat was quiet, with only the soft hum of distant engines and the clicking of small sea creatures nearby. Michael held a small flashlight in one hand and a camera in the other, taking photos of spots that needed fixing. He had just begun scanning a dented panel when something shifted behind him. The water grew slightly colder, and small fish scattered fast. Out of the cloudy distance, a large figure came forward, and without warning, a massive bull shark surged from the shadows. Its wide mouth opened as it darted directly at him. Michael had no time to react. The shark clamped down hard on his right thigh, shaking its body violently while slamming him against the metal hull. The force rattled his entire frame, and bubbles escaped rapidly from his gear. Pain hit him in waves as the shark twisted, its teeth cutting deep through the thick suit and muscle underneath. Blood filled the water fast, clouding everything in red. His arms pushed at the shark's head, trying to break free, but the heavy dive gear and tight grip made movement hard. Above the surface, his teammates saw the splashing and dropped ropes, hoping to distract the animal. One of them tossed down a metal tool that hit the water with a loud clang. In that moment, the shark let go. It turned sharply and vanished into the dark again. Michael floated just below the surface, struggling to move. His hands reached up and his crew quickly pulled him toward the side of the boat. They grabbed his vest and dragged him up, laying him on the deck with his leg torn and bleeding fast. The attack was over, but the danger had only just begun. Blood soaked the deck as Michael lay on his back, eyes half open and chest rising fast. His uniform clung to his skin, and the deep injury on his leg kept spilling dark streams across the floor. One of his crewmates pressed fabric tightly over the torn area, while another held his hand steady. His face had turned pale, and his lips lost their color. Every second counted, and the team worked in silence, only moving with clear purpose. A first aid kit was opened and clean wraps were pulled out. Thick padding was placed over the wound, and a belt was used to prevent further blood loss. Another member held Michael's head still while watching for any signs of slipping away. The fast movements and racing thoughts drowned out the sound of the sea around them. No one said a word, but each man knew they had to act fast before things got worse. A radio was used to call the nearest base. The message was clear, and the reply came quickly. Help was on the way. A chopper had been sent from the mainland and would arrive in less than 20 minutes. That time felt long as Michael's eyes closed again. One of the men placed a cold pack on his forehead and continued to check his pulse. His breathing slowed, but it had not stopped. The rest of the team stayed close, keeping him warm and covered. Soon, the distant sound of blades grew louder in the sky. A rescue helicopter appeared above the water and lowered a stretcher down by rope. The wind from the rotors pushed the sea into soft ripples. 2 medics descended with gear and instructions. They moved quickly, cutting away the rest of the damaged suit and applying new pressure pads. Tubes were placed for fluids, and his oxygen level was checked before lifting him into the stretcher. The team carefully pulled him up into the aircraft. Once secure, the chopper rose into the clouds and turned toward land. Back on the boat, silence returned. The crew cleaned the tools and folded the used supplies. Blood still marked the floor, but Michael was in good hands now. They looked at the spot where the shark had struck, knowing how close they had come to something worse. At the hospital, doctors began emergency work. The bite had damaged deep layers of soft tissue, breaking blood vessels and crushing part of the thigh muscle. Surgery took hours. The team repaired what they could, stopping the bleeding and giving his body the support it needed. After the operation, he was moved to a quiet room with soft lights and gentle sounds. Monitors showed signs of healing. The Coast Guard sent messages of support. Safety teams reviewed diving rules in the vicinity of the Keys. Extra patrols were added, and new training plans were written. Michael would need time to walk again, but he had survived. His crew visited often, proud of how fast they had acted. The sea had tested them, but they had not failed. On July 30th, 2025, the cool morning air drifted across the coastline of Mossel Bay, South Africa. The sky was just beginning to turn pink and orange as Michael van der Merwe stood near the shore with his surfboard. At 27, Michael was known in his town as a calm and kind person. He had grown up along the coast, spending years surfing with friends and exploring the waves. Surfing had become more than just a hobby. It gave him peace and joy. He worked at a small gear shop and taught beginners how to ride the waves on weekends. Most days he shared the sea with others, but this morning was different. He had planned a quiet date with his girlfriend for surfing. The couple had arrived early to catch the first light of day. The beach was empty, and only the sound of water filled the air. She sat on a blanket watching as Michael stepped into the shallow tide. He waved once, then began paddling into the deep, heading past the breakers. The sea was calm, and the wind was light. Michael reached a good spot and waited for the next wave, lying flat on his board. The light from the sky grew brighter. The water around him was smooth. Below the surface, shadows moved unseen. A great white shark, larger than a car, had been cruising silently in the deeper part of the bay. It had picked up on the movement and splashes. Its strong body moved slowly at first, then faster as it approached the floating shape above. From beneath, the animal rose quickly through the layers of blue. Without warning, it attacked. The shark burst upward and bit deep into Michael's calf. The grip was tight, and its teeth sliced through muscle and bone. His board jerked sideways, and he was pulled below the surface. He fought with every part of his body, twisting and kicking, but the power of the bite was too strong. The sea turned dark with blood. From the sand, his girlfriend saw the splash and the sudden motion. She stood up in shock as the surfboard floated alone, stained with red streaks. The sea became quiet again, the board rocking in the water. No sign of Michael returned. The shark had thrashed for several moments before letting go and vanishing into the deep, but Michael did not rise again. His body had been taken by the current, hidden beneath the moving surface. She screamed for help as others nearby ran to her side. Phones were used to call the local rescue team. Boats were sent out quickly, and divers entered the area marked by the floating board. The spot was scanned carefully as hours passed. Finally, his body was found further down the coast, carried by the underwater pull. The deep marks on his leg showed the full force of the attack. The peaceful morning had turned into a tragic scene no one could forget. The recovery team brought the body back to shore using a small rescue boat. The coast remained silent as people watched from a distance, unsure of what to say or do. The surfers nearby sat still on their boards, staring at the calm sea that had moments ago turned deadly. Paramedics were already on the beach, but they knew it was too late. Michael was placed on a stretcher, covered with a sheet, and moved gently toward the waiting ambulance. His girlfriend sat nearby, wrapped in a towel, her eyes wide and fixed on the ocean. Officials arrived shortly after to begin their report. They marked off the area and spoke to the crew that found him. The surfboard was collected as evidence. It had a long crack and deep marks along one edge. Blood still stained the foam. Officers checked the water temperature, wind speed, and tide movement. A warning sign was posted near the dunes, and swimmers were told to leave the water. Helicopters flew above, scanning for more shark movement near the coastline. News of the event spread fast. By afternoon, messages flooded local social media pages. People from nearby towns sent thoughts and shared stories of other close calls. Surfers who had known Michael spoke about how careful he had always been in the water. Many found it hard to believe something like this had happened to someone so skilled. Surf shops around the bay lowered their flags. Some businesses closed early out of respect for the victims. Marine experts gave statements explaining shark behavior. They said early mornings near deep channels could bring unwanted attention from large predators. The mix of low light and wave noise sometimes confused the underwater. They reminded the public that great whites followed patterns but could appear suddenly anywhere. It was not the first time the area had witnessed such an occurrence. Past events had also led to new rules, but the risk never fully left. In the following days, the town held a small gathering at the edge of the sand. People lit candles and placed surfboards with flowers beside them. Michael's parents came forward, thanking the rescue workers and those who had tried to help. His friends stood close, holding hands and looking out at the horizon. The sky was gray that evening, and the wind was light. No one entered the water. Officials announced updated safety steps for surfers and swimmers. A new flag system would warn of deeper patrols by large marine animals. Spotter drones would fly each morning during surf hours. Emergency kits were placed closer to shore, and lifeguards received extra training. The beach would open again soon, but the memory of the attack remained fresh. Michael's story was later shared in ocean safety programs. His board was displayed inside a surf museum, accompanied by a small sign beside it. People who visited learned not only about the sport, but also about the dangers that could arise at unexpected times. The peaceful sea had taken a life, but the lesson left behind became something lasting. On March 30, 2025, the wide ocean between Nassau and Eleuthera lay calm and clear under the hot midday sun. Far from land, a white sailboat rocked gently on soft swells. Aboard that boat was 34-year-old Ryan Foster, a sailor from Georgia who had spent years exploring the sea. He had grown up around boats, learning to steer and read maps before he even learned to drive a car. His dream had always been to sail alone across new waters, and this trip through the Bahamas was part of that dream. He had taken time off from his job as a marine mechanic and spent weeks preparing his small but strong vessel for the journey. Everything was checked: radio, maps, tools, and emergency gear. He carried food, water, and a full first aid kit. Ryan was a skilled sailor and loved the quiet beauty of the ocean, especially when it stretched out for miles with nothing but waves and wind. That afternoon, the heat grew strong. The sun sat high and the breeze had stopped. Ryan dropped anchor in deep water, planning to take a short swim to cool off. The sea around him was smooth and deep blue. He checked his gear and lowered the small swim ladder before slipping into the water. The quiet was peaceful, the kind that made the sea feel like another world. He floated with ease, letting his body relax in the cool water. Below him, the ocean floor was far out of view and light shimmered through the blue layers. But below the surface, something else moved. A long, dark shape appeared, moving slowly. An oceanic white-tip shark, bold and curious, had noticed the movement above. It circled once, staying just out of reach. Ryan had not seen it yet. The animal moved closer, its wide fins spreading as it drifted with calm control. Suddenly, without warning, the shark darted forward. In a flash, its jaws clamped tightly onto Ryan's forearm. Sharp teeth cut deep, and the pain came instantly. Blood flowed into the water, turning the blue into streaks of red. Ryan struggled to pull away, but the shark twisted, dragging him slightly below the surface. His body spun in the water as panic set in. He raised his free hand and struck at the shark's head. He scratched at its eye and pushed with all his strength. The shark jerked back for a moment and let go. Ryan kicked hard, his injured arm now weak and trailing blood. He reached for the boat ladder, grabbing the rungs with his good hand. His foot slipped once, but he climbed with effort. The shark circled again, but stayed just out of reach. With one final push, Ryan got onto the deck and rolled to his side, gasping and holding his bleeding arm. He was safe for now, but alone, and far from help in the middle of open water. Blood dripped steadily from his injured arm onto the deck as Ryan crawled toward the storage box near the cabin. His breath was quick and shaky. The pain in his arm grew worse, but his mind stayed focused. He opened the lid with effort and pulled out a clean towel, a small bottle of liquid, and the first aid kit he had packed before the trip. With trembling hands, he poured the liquid over the wound, gasping as it burned. Then, he pressed the towel hard against the deep cuts, trying to stop the bleeding. Inside the kit, he found bandages, tape, and scissors. Using only one hand, he wrapped the arm tightly, layer by layer, covering the torn skin. It took time, and the work made him feel lightheaded. But he kept going. Once the wound was covered, he leaned back against the side of the boat, his chest rising and falling fast. The shark was still somewhere below, but the water had gone still again. He stayed out of view from the edge, not wanting to draw more danger to himself. Next, Ryan reached for the radio. He turned the dial and picked up the mic. Static filled the air for a few seconds before he heard a faint sound on the other end. He spoke slowly and clearly, giving his name, his location, and what had happened. His voice shook, but he repeated the words until someone replied. A nearby fishing vessel heard the call and confirmed they were coming. He gave a rough time estimate and tried to stay calm while waiting. Minutes passed like hours. The pain in his arm stayed sharp and his fingers had started to go numb. He sipped water and placed his legs flat, hoping to keep his body steady. In the distance, a shape finally appeared. The small boat came closer, its engine growing louder. The crew waved and quickly tied a rope to Ryan's vessel. They stepped aboard, saw his condition, and helped him sit upright. One of them checked the bandages, added a second layer, and offered a blanket. They moved him to their boat and changed course toward the nearest medical center. The trip back was bumpy, but Ryan managed to stay awake. His skin had turned pale and his eyes looked heavy, but he never let go of the railing beside him. When they reached the harbor, paramedics carried him onto a stretcher and placed him in an ambulance. Doctors treated him right away. They cleaned the wound again, gave him fluids, and prepared him for surgery. The bite had torn muscles and caused deep tissue damage, but no bones were broken. The operation took hours, but it was successful. Ryan remained in the hospital for several days, resting and healing slowly. The event was shared in local news, reminding others that deep water is never truly safe. His calm actions and quick thinking had saved his life, but the memory of that day would never fade.